Second. So starting from right now, careful what you say.
Okay,
The video.
you let me know to start, Yossi.
Okay, we are live. I'm just going to give it a minute for people to join, and then we can set up our watch parties so the whole world will see. Just going to give it a minute for people to join. Okay, Rabbi Tachtel, it's all you. Unmute yourself.
Great to be here with all of you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, you were muted. Go.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. Great to be here with all of you, wherever you may be around the world. I am giving you greetings from Tempe, Arizona, where the weather right now is 109 degrees. Yes, you heard me right. So we're working on staying cool, staying safe, and doing what we got to do. I'm so happy that you're all here for an amazing discussion today. My name is Rabbi Shmuel Tachtel, and together with my wife Hannah and our dear children, we run the Chabad at Arizona State University since 2003. We are the home of the AS Jews. Welcome to another lecture in the summer series from Chabad on Campus International. My friends, we live in a time when people are desperate for inspiration and leadership. But have we ever considered that we, me and you, have it within ourselves to be true leaders? Or as the subject of tonight's talk, can anyone be a true leader? To discuss this, we're delighted to welcome Rabbi Aryeh Weinstein. Rabbi Weinstein is the rabbi of the Shul at Newtown, a Chabad synagogue in Newtown, Pennsylvania, and the director of the J. Michael Schwartz Jewish Learning Academy. He is a member of the editorial board of the Jewish Learning Institute and has been a featured lecturer at the National Jewish Retreat. Rabbi Weinstein, personally, is also the brother of Rabbi Avi Weinstein, the COO of Chabad on Campus International. I personally have learned a lot from Rabbi Weinstein's lectures, conversations, classes, and I'm so honored that he is going to be speaking with us tonight. Rabbi Weinstein is a sought-after lecturer. He is a host of a popular podcast and the author of It's Within You, the definitive guide to living life as you. Without further ado, Rabbi Aryeh Weinstein.
Thank you, Rabbi Tachtel. Thank you for that introduction. Greatly appreciated. Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, or wherever you may be. Thank you for joining. Leadership, can you be a leader? I'm offended by the title, by the question, can you be a leader? Here's the reality. The reality is that you must be a leader. In fact, it is expected of every single one of us to be a leader. The question is, this is the real question. The real question is, will you choose to have the courage to be a leader? And the reason why I say that is because we live in a time when there are many, many people who are leading. But there is a huge difference between someone who is leading and someone who is a leader. And the results that we experience between someone who is leading versus someone who is a true leader are enormous. They make all the difference. And a leader versus leading is, as they say in English, what separates the men from the boys. The person who has the courage to be a leader becomes a leader. But someone who does not have that courage, someone who is weak, and someone who is we can say a coward, and I'm using this word specifically, leads, but does not become a leader. And I'm saying the word coward because it requires true courage to develop ourselves into being a leader. And that's really what I want to get to and explain, I hope, very clearly tonight, in understanding the difference. And you will notice, if you don't know what I'm going to share with you yet, you will notice after tonight that you will easily be able to distinguish between people who are leading and people who are leaders. And it will be your choice as to who you will want to be. That's going to be your choice. So, and I hope you're going to choose to be a leader. And that's going to require you to start now if you have not started yet, and develop it slowly, as you will understand. We have a line from Shakespeare, which you may be familiar with. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. Every single one of us has leadership thrust upon us by the mere fact that we were born. You have friends. Every one of us has friends who looks up to us. We may have more, we may have less, but we surely have one or two who admire us, who look up to us. We may have siblings who look up to us. And as we move on in life and we develop more and more relationships, we may have coworkers who look up to us. As we develop more relationships, we can have a spouse, we can have children. We are all in a leadership position. We are leading. The question is, are we being leaders? And so the question of whether we can be a leader is not even a question. We are already inherently, by the fact that we exist in this world, leaders, in the position of being a leader. But are we just leading, or are we actually being leaders? That is the question that I'm posing before you. There was a gentleman who you may or may not have heard of. His name was Varlam Shalamov. He lived in the earlier part of the last century. He was a Russian gentleman. Despite his name being Shalamov, he was not Jewish, but he was a person who demonstrated very, very fierce, courageous character. He was thrown into the Gulag, which is the harshest of prisons in the world. And the Gulag, just to give a description, if you're not familiar, when someone was put into the Gulag, what they imprisoned first and foremost was your mind, was your psyche, was your spirit. That was the very first thing that was imprisoned, and it took only a couple of hours for someone's spirit to be imprisoned. The intimidation was so overwhelming and so fierce, and the environment and the construct and the way they designed and laid everything out. When a person came in, it was just a matter of a couple of hours, and anything that the powers of the time wanted that person to say or do, the person would say and do, except for rare individuals. And Varlam Shalamov was one of those rare individuals. He ended up going to a labor camp in Siberia, in sub-zero weather, where most prisoners did not survive more than a few years. They ended up dying. He survived, and he ended up getting out of prison and labor camps after, I think, about 16 years. He went in 1937, and here's what he said. He said, "I am proud to have decided right at the beginning of 1937 that I would never be a foreman. I would never let them raise me up to a position if my freedom could lead to another man's death. If my having a higher position, which made me a little bit more free than the rest of the prisoners, would lead to me having to abuse someone else. If my freedom had to serve the bosses by oppressing other people, prisoners like myself, I wouldn't take that. I wouldn't take a higher position. I would not be promoted in prison." And he said, both my physical and my spiritual strength turned out to be stronger than I thought in this great test. And I am proud that I never told anyone, never sent anyone to their death, never sold anyone, never sent anyone to their death, or to another sentence and never denounced anyone, which is what went on in the camps all the time. One person always felt he's going to be saved. They always pitted prisoners against each other. He never violated the fundamental values of a human being that many free people will violate, just to save his own skin. That requires enormous spirit under the trying situations he was in. The point is that he said, I found that I was stronger than I had thought. The only people who find out that they are stronger than they thought are people who actually act courageously. That's where you discover your real power. That's what he shares. And lastly, and this is the key point I want to share with you, he shares that I discovered that the world should be divided not into good and bad people, but into cowards and non-cowards. 95% of cowards are capable of the vilest things, lethal things, at the mildest threat. His point was simply this. His point was that if you take a good person, any good person, and you put them into a very trying situation, you're going to find that if you press them strongly, you oppress them strongly enough, they will be able to do the vilest of things, not because they're bad people, but because the conditions are so harsh that for survival, they will do very ugly things. And that's why he says, I wouldn't differentiate humanity between good and bad people. I would differentiate humanity between cowards and non-cowards. I'm going to say cowards and courageous people. And he demonstrated unbelievable courage. The reality is this, and I'm going to break this down so we can understand it. True leaders are courageous people. True leaders are courageous people. They step into a zone for a mission, not for themselves. And they are dedicated to that mission because they believe in it. And they don't let the stumbling blocks that come in their way, and the fact that people rise up against them, and that their popularity drops, they don't let any of those things stop them from standing up and letting their values lead them so that they can lead other people. And I will demonstrate to you how these leaders are true leaders. All other leaders are very temporary leaders, and the leadership shatters within time, and it happens all the time because they're leading, but they're not leaders. And when we, in our lives, whether it's small or large, depending on the circumstances, that the divine mission for us that's set out for us is, it will determine whether we are leaders of larger groups or smaller groups. And this really doesn't make a difference. Whatever circumstances God laid out for us, that's what our circumstances are. But we need to make sure that we are being leaders for those people, whether it's my family, whether it's my family and friends, whether it's my family, friends, and my employees, whether it's my coworkers, whether it's a community, because I become a community leader, whether it's a regional, a county, or a state, or a country, or a world. Today we have access. We potentially can be leaders worldwide because we all have a platform to reach the entire world if we can get our message out there. See, here's the thing. There are cowards who lead, and there are courageous leaders. Cowards who lead use a method that is the easiest method to lead people, and that is power. Some examples, some historic examples that you'll be familiar with. Stalin led with power, intimidation, force, fear. That's how he controlled people. Was anyone following Stalin? No, people were not following Stalin. They were terrified of Stalin. In fact, the moment people who are in fear of someone in power see that that person in power is toppling, what do? They run away from the person. The first sign that this person is not a leader. They are leading, but they are not a leader. No one's really following them. People are forced to follow them. Hitler, Saddam Hussein. What's the first thing Saddam Hussein did when he came into power? He went in front of the entire parliament, I think it's called, in Iraq, and he started having people shot in front of every other parliament members shot in front of other parliament members. Why? Instill fear. It's control and it's power. You can take Kim Jong-un, right, in North Korea. It's all power, intimidation, and fear. And there are modern forms of power that we will find in more civilized parts of the world, such as ours, the United States and other civilized countries. And that is that people who want to be leaders, but don't have the courage to be true leaders. So they end up leading. The way they get to lead is by using different more civilized forms of coercion. They'll use their position. They'll use their wealth. They'll use their connections. They'll use all different types of methods that will prop them up and give them the power that they have. Essentially, the core point is that they rely on others for their power. They do not rely on themselves. They don't have resources within themselves to be leaders. They rely on a scaffolding to hold them up. And that's very dangerous, because when you're not in control of your leadership is not in your control, and it ends up crumbling down. One part of that scaffolding pulls out and the whole thing comes crumbling down. And that's exactly what happens to people who are leading, but who are not leaders. And this is the reason why, it's known that power, when shared, divides. Power cannot be shared, because power is terrified of anyone else showing up, because if anyone else shows up, that's a threat to me, because my entire power is about me. It's not about the people I'm leading. It's not about the causes I claim I'm passionate about. It's about me being in power, and anything that threatens my power is fear. It instills fear in the leader. It's all about self, and it's all about arrogance. What is true leadership? True leadership is not someone who uses power. True leadership is someone who uses influence. Influence, you see, if you pull out a gun and you hold it to someone's head, you're going to get a response very quickly. You can get someone to comply very, very quickly, right? If you use influence, you will not get people to respond very quickly. It takes a lot more time. Influence, not only that, it takes a lot of time for someone to develop influence. However, power comes quickly and it gets toppled quickly. When I say quickly, I'm talking about in the scheme of history. If we're talking about history, it may take 30, 40 years, but it comes crumbling down with a crash and never rises back up again. But influence, not only is the influence takes much longer time to develop, but influence also lasts much, much longer. In fact, influence can outlive a person. It can outlive a person for tens of years and for hundreds of years or thousands of years. And we have many, many examples of that. So some classic secular examples you're probably familiar with of people who used influence, and their influence still remains in the world until today. One is Mahatma Gandhi, right? He used influence. He didn't use power. Nelson Mandela, he used influence. He didn't use power. Whether we agree or disagree with all of their views is irrelevant. The point here that I'm trying to bring out is that they were people who slowly spoke something that genuinely was true in their heart, that they genuinely believed in, that they would never give up on. And they didn't impose it on other people. They spoke it from the integrity of their own spirit, of their own soul. And that touched other people's spirit. And slowly it grew and grew and grew. And it outgrew and outlived even them. That's something that's very powerful. And that is what leadership actually is. Influence, when shared, multiplies. That's why influential people love when other people take their message and spread it, or other people copy them. They see that as a compliment. I'm trying to influence and you're helping me. That is fantastic. In fact, as many people say, genuine leaders actually turn their followers into leaders. That is exactly what they want to do. We have a classic biblical example of this. Moses was the greatest prophet that actually ever lived. And at one point, he told God that he can't handle managing the people, the Jewish people with their complaints. And so God said, spread your spirit over the 70 elders, and your prophetic spirit will spread onto them, not quite on the same level, but they will become prophets. And suddenly, two of these gentlemen of the 70 started saying prophecy amongst the Jewish people. And Joshua, who was Moses' primary disciple, came to Moses and said, your position is being threatened. You have other people running around saying prophecy. And you know what Moses said? I wish every Jew was a prophet. That's fantastic. He had no objection to that because he wasn't in a power position. He was in an influence position. And influence only wants multiplication. Power is terrified of that. That's one of the big differences between the two. And the reason why someone who is a true leader and has influence is not scared of competing elements is simply because of this. Their leadership is not about themselves. Their leadership is entirely about the cause. So they're not threatened. If the cause, if the message, if the mission is getting out there, that is exactly what we want. That is fantastic. If it's not getting out there, that's a problem. I don't have enough influence. When we speak about someone of power, I want power. You threaten my power, and the whole system is being threatened now. That is the key difference between the two. And this is the reason why influence is long lasting, because it's genuine, it's authentic, and it's real. So we need to have the courage, although it requires tremendous courage, and I'm going to explain to you why it requires tremendous courage right now. Because if we want to lead, and we want to be genuine leaders who are leading, the very first person that we need to lead, and probably the most important, I shouldn't say probably, definitely the most important person that we must lead, and never forget about leading and continuously lead, is ourselves. And that requires a lot of courage. It requires more courage maybe than we realize. That requires a lot of courage for a person to look within themselves honestly and deeply, with vulnerability, to be open and to be as objective as we possibly can, because that is our number one challenge in life, is for every individual to be as objective as possible, and to be able to recognize my weaknesses, to hear what people tell me, even though it's not complimentary, and to look into that to see if there's any truth to that. All of this is the way we lead ourselves. And if we are unwilling to lead ourselves, we will not be able to lead others. And here's the reason why. Because you can only lead people as deeply as you are. You cannot take them deeper than yourself. So if we do not develop depth of character, depth of values, depth of commitment, if we don't develop those things, we cannot inspire that in other people. We can get onto the front page of a newspaper or of a website. We can get our name out there and we'll have our moment, but it's only going to be a fleeting moment, because people will not be inspired by someone who isn't developed themselves. And this requires courage, which is the reason why, unfortunately, there are many people who do not go deep in their lives because it's not easy, but it is expected of every single one of us. And the results that we get from that are far greater than personal results. People stand up behind us and follow us as leaders because they see a person who has a value system, who has integrity, who will stand by it, who, when called out about a flaw that they truly have, will acknowledge it, has honesty, has strength and courage to stand up for something that is true, even though it's not popular, is not there just to, so to speak, get votes, but is there to make sure the cause is seen through. That is true leadership. There's a fantastic Hasidic story that I love about a Hasidic master, the Siatin Rebbe, who came to in the 1930s due to the circumstances in Europe. He ended up coming to Vienna a modern city, a city that never really saw a Hasidic Rebbe and the way he looked, and with all of his Hasidim, with the fur hat, the strimal, right, and the whole garb and everything. And one day when he was there, he was walking down the street, and there was a reporter there that saw him, and the reporter asked one of the Hasidim, one of his followers, "Who is this?" They said, "Oh, he is a Wunder Rebbe. A Wunder Rebbe is a wonder rabbi. He's like a wonder rabbi. He's an off the charts rabbi. He's a unique individual, a great spiritual master." And so he said, "Do you think I'd be able to get an interview with him? I would love to interview him. He was a reporter. Great opportunity, great story." So the man said, "Well, let's see what we can arrange." And he arranged actually a meeting between this reporter and this Rebbe, this Hasidic master. And when he met him, the reporter says, "Rabbi, they tell me that you are a Wunder Rebbe, a wonder rabbi. Yeah, it sounds like something really unique and special, but I don't know what that is. What is a Wunder Rebbe? What's a wonder rabbi?" He says, "Oh, you want to know what a Wunder Rebbe is? I'm going to tell you what a Wunder Rebbe is." He says, "You see, there are rabbis who are rabbis over a synagogue. They're the rabbi of a synagogue, right? And they control the synagogue. What goes on in the synagogue. That's their authority. And they determine how things should be run. You have also a rabbi who's a little bit of a bigger rabbi. He's a shtot rabbiner, which would be a city rabbi. He's the chief rabbi of the city. He controls everything that goes on, spiritual affairs, Jewish affairs in the city. That's his domain. That's his responsibility. And then you have, he said, a rabbi of a country, not just a city, but of a country. He's the chief rabbi of the country. He runs all spiritual affairs going on in the country." He says, and then you have a Wunder Rebbe. He says, what is a Wunder Rebbe? A Wunder Rebbe is a person who simply controls himself. This is such a fantastic story, because what he was expressing was, number one, we don't need to control other people. We don't need to have some powerful seat. We just need to control the one person that we have the power to control, and that is ourselves. And what we discover when we do that is that we suddenly discover that our influence is not just over a synagogue, it's not just over a city, it's not over a country, it's over anyone that meets us, because they see that this person has real integrity. This person is willing to look within themselves and say, who am I? Who was I created to be? What does it mean to be a Jew? I'm a Jew. I can't dismiss that. I have to investigate what that is. And how can I be authentic to that? What values do I believe in? How can I be authentic and genuine to those values and promote those values in a very real way? When someone lives their life this way, people see integrity, which is unfortunately is not as common as it should be. They see a person who cannot be moved, cannot be bought off, a person who's committed. And one by one, the following grows. And this person becomes a very, very powerful leader. What a leader really needs, more than anything else, is humility. There was a statement in the Talmud that where rabbis were asked to take on a certain position, and they declined the position. And the rabbi who was asking them to take on the position said, "Do you think I'm offering you power in this position? I'm not offering you power." He said, "I am offering you servitude." When someone becomes a leader needs to know that my job is to serve. I don't gain from my leader position. I give from my leadership position. It's a servitude position. It's a position of a person who is dedicated to something, to someone, or to people. Which means I'm not here to benefit from it. I'm here to make sure other people benefit from me. And that requires a very strong level of humility. In fact, you may have heard of King David. King David was the second Jewish king after the Jews came into the land of Israel from the desert, about They had their first king close to 400 years after they came into around 400 years after they came into Israel. They had their first king. Then the second king was King David, and the kingdom stayed is to remain in the Davidic family. King David's son Solomon succeeded him, and after Solomon died, Solomon had a son by the name of Rechavam. When Rechavam stepped into leadership, he made a big mistake right when he started. What happened was a group approached him. And they were led by a man by the name of Yeravam, who would end up creating somewhat of a civil war amongst the Jewish people. And that's when the Jewish people split from 12 tribes to 10 and 2. With this man Yeravam. But Yeravam didn't come necessarily with the intention of splitting the Jewish people. He came to Rechavam and he said that your father imposed heavy taxes on us, a very heavy weight on us. It's too much for us. We're asking you to please alleviate the pressure on us, and we will be your servants. We'll be right behind you. So Rechavam didn't know what to do. He was a new leader. And here people are asking him to be nice, right? To be compassionate. And he thought to himself, well, should I be compassionate? And will they then get behind me? Or will I be showing weakness and then ruin my leadership just from the start? That was his dilemma. And this is a classic dilemma that many leaders have. So he went to his father's advisors who are still living. And he said, what would you advise me to do? His father had passed away. He asked his father's advisors, and they said, listen to us. Don't impose hardship on them. It's the wrong way to start. Show compassion. Connect with them. And they will be your servants for the rest of your leadership. They'll be right behind you. Then he said, okay. He went to some of his friends, some young individuals who did not have experience and were arrogant. And they said, you have to show strength right in the beginning, or otherwise you're going to lose control. And who did he listen to? He listened to his friends. He listened to his friends, and that split the Jewish people. That split the Jewish people. We never recovered from that yet, until today. Why? Because he didn't have humility, and he chose to use arrogance and power. I want to explain something very important to you. I think it's a very important distinction for you to know the difference between arrogance and humility, because humility is one of the most misunderstood words in the English language. So I want you to understand what humility means. Humility, I would, if you want to really understand this well, arrogance equates to weakness. It's the exact opposite of the way people understand this. Arrogance equates to weakness. Humility equates to strength. And let me explain why. When someone's agenda is all about themselves, they are arrogant. It's very easy to tick them off. It's very easy to hit their buttons. It's very easy to trigger them because they have chosen to put their power in the hands of all of the people that they are looking for to get respect from. And when you give over your power, you are weak. It's so easy to get an arrogant person angry. And you can sit there and just laugh. I mean, not that we should do this, right? But you can sit there and just laugh at how easy it is to trigger this guy. So sad in some respect. A humble person is not about themselves at all. Humility simply means that I am not living life for myself. I am living for a value system, for a purpose, and for a cause. So humility means it's not about me. I push myself to the side. I diminish my presence, and I step into the presence of my mission, the reason why God put me here. When a person does that, you can try and hit all their buttons. It doesn't do anything. They are focused on their mission, and they will not get off that path. So when you go to if you go to many politicians, and you show them that by continuing on the path of what they campaigned about, they're going to lose most of their votes, they're going to get right off that path. If you go to someone who has humility and you threaten them that way, they're not fazed one iota. I'm not here for the votes. I may be voted out. I am here because I know that this is important for society, and therefore I will not give up doing it. Very rare to find, because we have a lot of people who are leading. We have very few leaders, because leadership requires humility. And here's a really fascinating thing, which I'm going to conclude with. Fascinating thing is like this. In the code of Jewish law, we are taught that every single morning before a person prays, a person's supposed to meditate. A person's supposed to meditate. And the meditation is supposed to be, in a general sense, about gadlus habore v'shiflus ha'adam. That means the greatness of the Creator and the smallness of man. For me to realize that I, created by an infinite being, and I just being one human being in this vast universe of 7.5 billion people, and very limited in my understanding, very limited in my capability, very limited in my resources. And I meditate about that, about the awesomeness of God. And I meditate about the smallness, the genuine smallness. It's not a diminishment of a person, right? Not to put us down, but to put us in perspective. And then through doing that, I say, I am going to dedicate myself to the cause that this infinite Creator put me on this world for. I'm not going to dedicate myself to my cause, my small little cause as a just one of 7.5 billion human beings, but of the cause that the Almighty put me here for. We turn into powerful leaders. We know what we need to do. We just turn to the infinite Creator. We turn to how the infinite Creator guided us. And we have conviction. And we also have humility because it's not about us. So if someone points out that we're off track, we have the humility to look at ourselves and say, well, am I off track or not? And if I am, gosh, I don't want to be off the track of the mission God put me here for. I'll get right back on. Thank you for pointing that out. That's how a humble person responds to criticism. Or they say, actually, I hear what you're saying. I thought about it for a couple of days. I spoke to a few people about it, but actually, I'm on the right track, sir. And I'm sorry you're not happy with what I'm doing, but this is the right thing to do. And this is what I will continue doing. Fearless, courageous. That's what leaders do. So I leave you with this. Be a powerful leader. Know how to be a leader. Don't lead. Be a leader. Develop influence. Take it slow. It's going to grow. If you are authentic, your leadership will be authentic. Your following will grow. And you will actually be one of those leaders who will change the world. Thank you for joining us this evening. I don't know if there's any way for people to ask questions, but I'm open. I'm here for as long as you'd like. Is there a question?
Thank you very much, Rabbi Weinstein. There was a couple of shout outs from students about how their rabbis are true leaders.
Oh, bravo. Of course. Chabad and campus rabbis are the most awesome rabbis. All the other Chabad rabbis are trying to catch up.
Thank you very, very much, Rabbi Weinstein. We really appreciate it for you taking the time to share with us. And early Shabbat Shalom to
Shabbat
you
shalom
and
to
to
you.
everyone.
Yep.
Signing up.
Very good. Be well. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.